Welcome to Gate Crashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, our code is this: to make all the things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. My name is Nikki, pronouns she, they.
And I'm Dan, my pronouns are he, him. And today we're joined by three very special guests. First, we've got Tim Seeley, who's currently writing Spider-Gwen into the Gwenverse, Superman v Lobo, and also known for Hack and Slash Revival and Money Shot, among other things, including his upcoming film Revealer. We've got Aaron Campbell, who worked on John Constantine Hellblazer, Suicide Squad Blaze, and Infidel. We've also got Jim Terry, creator of Come Home Indio. He's also working on titles including The Crow, Sundowners, Vampirella, and more. These three are working together on Vault's newest series, West of Sundown, a new Western title coming soon. How the hell are you?
Good. Doing good.
Very excited to have all of you here.
Very well.
Tim is our only returning guest, our first, and I hope not our last, but we'll see how this one goes. Now, I don't know if you know too much about us, but we are known as pretty hard-hitting journalists, and we always start our interviews off with something pretty heavy. So, Aaron and Jim, this one's for you specifically. Tim, I've got something different for you, but what's your favorite sandwich?
Sandwich.
I'm a big fan of the Reuben.
That's the wrong answer always.
Yeah.
Man, I think
it not only has a human name, but it is very tasty.
I'm gonna one up Jim, and I'm gonna go with the Monte Cristo, which is a deep fried Reuben.
So I will tell you that 90% of comics people say Reuben.
A good one.
I don't know what it is about comics people, but I guess they're just messy humans.
I said the Cuban, right? Because that's the best sandwich. That's it.
Oh yeah, Cubano. Oh man, yeah, Cubano. Man, I don't know. Maybe a Cubano. Damn you.
I said Reuben because it feels like a luxury, because usually it's, two pieces of bread, dry white bread with a slice of ham and American cheese in the middle. So Reuben seems like, I'm really stepping
We'd
up.
all be like, Jim's fancy. He's got Reubens all the time.
You see Jim, he's eating Reubens now.
He
Got all fancy. Started on that.
See, Aaron got a Monte Cristo. What is he, Rockefeller?
So, Tim, being that you've been here before and you got to answer that question, I had to think of a special question for you on the fly. And this is yours. If you had to fist fight one character you created, who would it be?
Oh, man. So it had to be a douchebag. I got a few of those in there. Let's see. Oh, the president from Money Shot, who's the sort of like the guy that comes after Trump, who's like Trump but dumber, even dumber. I pick him.
That's a good answer. So I've got a couple questions for you, and Nikki's got some of the heavy hitters. So with this series kind of dealing with monsters and horror and things, how did you approach writing a horror with Western flair, specifically in your voices?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of a fusion of our voices, which is helpful because I think I have a more informal voice with this, and Aaron can kind of bring this, he's more like a dungeon master. He thinks of everything kind of literary, I think. And then it goes through the filter of Jim, and then once we get it back, we tweaked it. So it's kind of once we see it, then we kind of modify it. So it does end up being like a really kind of all of us, which that's kind of what I wanted when we started this anyway. So that's been, a nice part of this process.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with that. I get really wordy and world buildy because I am a dungeon master. So like my inclination is to just like flesh everything out to the nth degree. And then I send all of my chaos to Tim. He's like, like this doesn't contribute to the story. Let's hone in on this. We don't have that much space.
And Jim says, I don't want to draw that shit. And then we just and then we get just the best stuff. So it's all very intense, you know. But like one thing I think we talked about from the beginning too was that this was going to be sort of a fusion of, you know, it's classic literary monster. So, you know, the way these characters talk is fairly well established, right? Like Mr. Griffin, obviously Mr. Dirk, they've already starred in books. And so they have a pretty, you know, a well sort of considered voice. And we try to capture those things. And, you know, how much research you can really do for how people talked in the Old West, because it's mostly so fictionalized. But one thing I did find out was that, you know, the way, like a lot of Westerns you watch now, HBO stuff, they always have people swearing, like he's like Al Swearingen. It's literally in his fucking name. And no one would have sworn that much back in that day because it was still pretty poo-pooed on. It's like, one thing people forget about the Old West is it's still very Victorian, right? Like they're still influenced by, so it's really conservative. And, you know, even though they're sort of out beyond this culture, they still don't swear that much. So we've had to contain our sweariness a little bit in this book.
So, Jim, this is for you. With this being a Western, what influenced your design of the characters? Did you have any specific things that have like Southern flair that you wanted to bring to, say, the monsters other than the people?
Well, the benefit of working with two artists is that they brought their own ideas, and then I just sort of put them through my filter and then tried to make them my own. But the ideas, most of the character ideas were pretty well established by the time they got to me. And I am just really cognizant of what Tim told me initially, which was this is Sergio Leone meets Hammer horror. And so I really try to bring that sensibility to it. Plus, you know, I'm a really huge fan of not only EC Comics, who did their fair share of great Western stuff, but also a lot of the European work. So I'm trying to bring some of that influence into it as well. And that's really it. It's just a mishmash of all the things that I love to draw. So it's been an absolute delight. For me.
I can totally see Blueberry in Jim's work. Like,
well, I'll take that. I mean, it's unworthy, but yes.
Or a perfect fusion of like Bernie Wrightson, Mobius, and like one of those EC artists. Like, I'm trying to think a good version of this, but you're like that fusion of those guys. So that's what we were, you know, that's what we wanted, and that's what we got. It's a perfect sort of matchup of all our aesthetics, I think, which was, you know, when we first talked about this, Aaron and I, well, we have to get Jim. If I don't ask him, he'll never talk to me again.
Yeah. I not only wouldn't talk to you, I'd hunt you down.
Now, you have mentioned that there are going to be different monsters throughout the series. Were there any monsters to you that felt like they belonged in Western stories that we haven't seen before?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot.
I think every monster belongs in a Western story.
And that's a big part of this book is that we actually sort of picked a very distinct era. Like there's a space of a couple of years where this kind of takes place. And we sort of tracked down where all these literary horror characters were. And so, you know, Mr. Dirk and Mr. Griffin, obviously, you know, Mr. Griffin, his actual novel that he shows up in takes place in the 1900s. So he's younger here. But actually, obviously, Mr. Dirk is much older because he showed up in a book that took place in 1760 or so. So we figured it out. We know where everybody in this sort of like Western literature, I mean Western like European, Western literature horror world is. We know the European canon. We know where Dracula is. We know where Moreau is. We know all those things. So obviously, this first arc is about setting up these characters, setting up our town, setting up the story, and we know where all of these things can be, you know, attached to. We know where all the Lovecraft stuff is. We figured all of that out before we did the first issue, even.
Huh. It is good to know that you've kind of world built a lot and didn't completely shut Aaron down on building those things out.
I couldn't.
A lot of that is like Tim says, put a pin in that, remember it, write it down somewhere for later.
Yeah, I have put a pin in that like 50 times in the past 2 years.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh man, I just thought of something. It's like, we don't have space for that, but put a pin in it.
Now, before I pass it over to Nikki, I have a question for you, Tim. Now, some would say you bring a level of sexiness to all the work that you do. Will you be bringing any of that particular pizzazz to this series?
Yeah. I mean, it's less a little bit, but one of the things that we really wanted to play with, obviously the Hammer thing was always like these unbelievably beautiful women with the best cleavage ever put on film, and there's just no way you're not going to play up that sort of Victorian, because it was really conservative and really, like restrained. But obviously they were all pushing this sort of like, corsets and everything else. So we're definitely going to play with that. The relationship between Dooley and Constance is sort of like somehow they seem kind of platonic, but there's always these weird things about them because he's essentially sort of her Renfield to some degree. But on the other hand, like, he's got to deal with the fact that she's like the most beautiful woman in the world at the moment, right? So it's we definitely want to play with it. It's secondary to this story, though. We have a prostitute character, so that'll be something we get to later. So we'll deal with sex in the Old West for sure, but primarily it's going to be about sort of the birth of the American monster.
Beautiful. Nikki, it's all yours.
Okay. So what drew me to this story, just hearing about it initially and seeing some early interviews, the idea of playing with crossroads of cultures in the New Mexico area, just in that Wild West period. And there aren't a lot of people who can just say like, yeah, 1800s New Mexico, Wild West. That's the story that I really want to tell, that I have some expertise in. And some of the things I've seen, it was just like, this is something you really are passionate about. So tell me more about how sort of that fascination fueled the story.
Campbell, that's on you.
So yeah, it's on me. So when Tim first pitched the idea to me, it was West. And I was the one who was like, dude, let's set it in New Mexico. I live in New Mexico. I live in Albuquerque. I'm not from New Mexico, but I have been coming to New Mexico since I was 15 years old. My wife was born and raised here. My brother-in-law born and raised here. Lived here in New Mexico now for about 15 years permanently. My wife works in arts and culture here in New Mexico. And for a long time, for 13 years, she worked in the museums, the historical sites of New Mexico. So I've developed a deep passion, love, and knowledge of the history of New Mexico. I'm still like, I'm still skimming the surface of what I really know. And this has been a great opportunity to deepen that understanding even further. But one thing that's always fascinated me about New Mexico is outside of like a handful of like Spanish settlements, it has the deepest sort of cross-cultural history in North America. And beyond that, in terms of indigenous history, we are home to the longest settled site in all of North American Native history. There's a town called Acoma. It's a pueblo called Acoma. And Acoma Pueblo has been settled continuously. People still live there to this day. It's been settled and lived in continuously for 1,000 years, as far as history knows, and as far as the history of the Acoma people recorded. So the roots of history here go back beyond anything you can equate to like Northern European settlement of the colony area. And it's so complex and it's so nuanced and interesting. And outside of New Mexico, that history really isn't understood very well at all. And any chance I get to tell that history, and in a Western, like that's one thing I'll kind of dog on Westerns a little bit, is as much as I love Sergio Leone and just kind of the entire Western canon, Westerns tend to not concern themselves too much with that cultural aspect of what they're doing. It's really about this kind of moment in time. And I thought this is a perfect chance to just get into that as much as we can in, 20 pages an issue. But, and so a lot of the world building that Tim and I do behind the scenes is really just kind of like just little nods, little things that we can put in there that suggest the complexity of what life in the 1870s here in New Mexico would have been. There's sort of this kind of cultural myth that's existed for a long time called Tres Culturas. It's the three cultures. It's Native culture, Spanish culture, and Anglo culture. It's the intersection between those three. But that's sort of being challenged now because there's also African-American culture here, Asian culture. There's so many other cultures that were intersecting at this time. It's just there's so much we can do with it.
So there you go. That's all the answer you could ever want.
Yeah, no, that was that actually answered another one of my questions. So that was brilliant. And I want to go ahead and throw this in there just as not to make it about me, but another reason I loved this and it being about New Mexico, my great-great-grandfather was a missionary, a preacher who would go around to bars in New Mexico in this area, this crossroads, and he would preach to people at bars. And I have he wrote that in his autobiography. And so when I read about West of Sundown, I was like, oh, in my head canon, my great-great-grandfather is out there getting into God knows what. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what he's doing, but he's probably trouble because I came from him. So it's it's not good, whatever he did out there. But yeah, love that answer. I'm really excited to see how y'all play with that and explore it even further.
Enjoy our bad guy then when we get to it, main villain.
Oh, is that my great grandfather? That'd be great. So just move on. A lot of talk kind of about grounding it in the history of the area, but there's some amazing other historic details outside of this general premise of exploring New Mexico. But there are shout outs to Richard Wagner's opera, The Valkyrie. I was not expecting that page. And here you have Constance, and she's an opera singer. And I'm like, okay, that's a choice. And that's a shout out to Nordic and German legends. And then there's even this mention of the American realism painter, Thomas Eakins. And so I'm looking at that and I'm starting just to kind of get the vibe off of this interview. There are a lot of shout outs and references and world building in this. How much of that is really going to be in there? How many times did you have to tell Aaron, all right, seriously, time out on this? But I have to say, what other ones do you have? And
well, it's funny about the Thomas Eakins reference because I had suggested John Singer Sargent as the individual who painted Constance. And that was a reference to his painting Madame X, because he was famous at that time for painting socialites in New York. But Tim, I've been meaning to ask you this actually. Why did you put Thomas Eakins in there? Did I do that? Okay, then I must have done that in a drunken stupor. Thomas Eakins is my ancestor. So I guess I did that. I remember reading it. My brain has been so all over the place recently that I forget half the things that I do. Okay. I love references like that. So I think we try, like, it's a way to like develop story without having to like get into the weeds.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the things that we want to play with too is just, that time it was, there was a whole bunch of other things going on. So Constance was part of this world that was like burgeoning, and New York in the 1870s was like, kind of growing to this height. Like New York was a place to be, and for her to have to leave it is a really hard decision for her, because she was toast of the town, right? Like she's she's at a party with Boss Tweed, one of the what do they call those, Aaron, the French or those the parties that they had where that was to get all the rich people together.
Oh yeah, yeah. So the Academy of Music in New York, which was the predecessor to the Met, they would have these big blowout orgy parties, at like full on orgies. But also during these parties, the performers would have performances, and you would have like all of the New York elite at these things, and they would just descend into debauchery. And I remember Flight of the Valkyrie, I was trying to find something, because I know Constance is sort of like, her character is sort of masquerading as a German character. And I thought, oh, well, what makes more sense than Flight of the Valkyrie for her seminal, like the thing, the piece that she's known for. And then there's some good lines in the Flight of Valkyrie that kind of spoke to that moment, what was happening.
And then later in the series, Constance mentions that she's seen Boss Tweed naked, so she can handle anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I was a big fan of the novel The Alienist, which also takes place at this time, and Boss Tweed plays a big role in that. And I was like, this is right when Boss Tweed was active. We've got to have him in this, even if he's just. And we gave passing.
Jim the reference to Thomas Nast drawings of him, which is a comics and cartoon nod. So we have wide interests.
Yeah.
Besides boobs and,
go ahead.
I say besides boobs and blood, we're also interested.
Yeah. West of Sundown, more than boobs and blood. Like that's it is. I want to go back to just sort of that opening page where it's the first place you are. You're in the aftermath of the Battle of Manassas. That's the first battle of the Civil War. It's not a great place for anybody to be, and a vampire is just there. But it immediately aligns Dooley in a lens of like, I want to make sure I'm correct here. He's a Confederate soldier, even though he's paid to be a Confederate soldier. And that sort of puts him in this, like, how am I supposed to take this character and, really care about him? Because most people see that and they're like, most people, hopefully, see that and it's like, this person, I don't want to feel anything for a Confederate soldier. So how do you use that, moving forward with his character development?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we talked about a lot. And there are moments in this book where multiple people do terrible things, not just monster things like drink blood, Mm-hmm. But one of the themes in the book, the sort of myth that America has about itself, that we're like these stand-up heroes in the world, but like it all comes from blood, like it all was built on the backs of someone. And if that's what the story is really about, I think, and that's what we keep kind of coming back to, then it would be dishonest not to mention it, and so Dooley, as we get to know him more, the reason that he basically took a job, and as we find out, the rebel army, when it sort of early in the war, would just hire mercenaries, Germans and Irish and stuff, and people didn't know what they were fighting; they were just taking a job, So, but that's also not a great excuse. So we talk about all those things. I mean, we kind of felt like everyone had to be no one was perfect. And there's a lot, all our characters are sort of, they're going to be given opportunities to be better people. And, if that's the story of America, we're still failing, right? We're still failing at being better people. So,
and it's a commonality of in Westerns that you rarely have. Well, especially once you get into the Sergio Leone period. Prior to that, of course, you have the John Wayne period, and that's where you have like paladins, and like John Wayne was basically a paladin, a piece of shit paladin. Like what's funny about John Wayne is like ultimately he becomes, the way that he's perceived now is very much as this villain. He's this archetype of whiteness. And by the time you get to Sergio Leone period, nobody is a paladin anymore. Everyone's a villain. Clint Eastwood was never really a good guy in any of his films. He was always a piece of shit. So, and I think what's so interesting, like one of my favorite films is Cold Mountain. And it's about, and I've read the book too. The book is really incredible. And it's about this disaffected Confederate soldier who like comes to this realization that he's fighting for some rich man's cause that he doesn't believe in. He doesn't give a shit about. And he doesn't even understand because he lives in this like little backwater, like cove, in the Carolinas. Like he's never seen an enslaved person in his life. Why is he fighting for this? And Dooley, he's fought one day of the war and already realizes, what the fuck am I fighting for? And so when he digs up Constance, I mean, it's his out. I mean, like, man, like what, like talk about striking the light, just like hitting the lottery. I mean, he hears a bell ring from a grave and then digs up this beautiful woman who whisks him off to live this life of luxury in New York. Who wouldn't take that? Even if they are fucking vampire.
And then the story becomes, well, what did you trade? Right? You escaped one thing, and what new master do you serve?
I want to go back, and I don't know if this will be answered later on. I don't know if it's a spoiler. How the hell did she just end up there?
We have a reason, but we're not going to tell you.
Yeah, we're not going to tell you. Like, just the clues are. I mean, there's clues in there, but one of the big clue is I mean, the reference we're making is the bell in the grave. So
to me, it's just she wakes up and she's like, "Oh, this war. Oh, Davis is still doing this. Okay." And I would just be like, "Why are you here? Where did you come from?"
Yeah, we'll do a zero issue someday or something, and we'll get to.
Yeah. We got to keep that one, in the grave for now.
This is like based on true stuff. They used to put bells on, in like some small towns and stuff. They would put bells on graves because they occasionally would bury people who weren't dead. They thought they were dead, but they would be in a coma, or they would, and sometimes they would, dig up a grave later and they would find, nail marks on the inside of the coffin. And then that's also sort of where the legend of vampires come from, because they would dig people up being like, were they dead? And then they would look at the people and their lips would be pulled back because they've been rictus, and their teeth would stick out. And so they thought, oh my God, this is the cause of, whatever disease was going around. And then they would chop their head off. So we thought it all kind of tied together.
Yeah.
So going back to world building, just to be a stalker, Aaron, there was a tweet at one point, and I made note of this tweet, that at the back of every issue, there's going to be diaries and maps. What more can you?
Oh man. Yeah, unfortunately that got put in the cutting room floor. We are planning that for the trade. Theoretically, don't quote us on that, but unfortunately, like our schedules kind of, and with as we were trying to get the first issue done, we just ran up against a brick wall, and so we're going to have to push that as extra content for the trades is our goal. But I think the idea that I had was just like have a few pages of back matter, which of course now we're going to kind of compact into the trade, and it's going to be like, it can kind of be sky's the limit. In my brain, I have like diary entries, I have like maps, because I fucking love maps. I am a big fan. Like the last video game I played, I don't play video games very often because I'm a video game addict, so I have to like be very careful. But the last one I played was Red Dead Redemption 2, and I just fucking love the way that the map works in that game. And I was like, we should do this. We should do this because this is a fictional region of New Mexico. It doesn't exist. It kind of overlays a real place in northern New Mexico, but it's all fictionalized. So I would love to do that for West of Sundown, and who knows what else. Like I love making models. I was thinking like, oh, it'd be fun to do like a model of Sangre de Moro. Like, who knows? Like, there's all kinds of possibilities for that stuff. Like Tim's laughing at my insanity.
I find kind of inspired, but it's also like mildly stresses me out. That's all.
Yeah, I know. That's why, like, I try not to press it too hard.
I'm excited about what you do either way. I'm not trying to press Tim, but I'm really excited about the trade. Okay, so
all right, yeah, get those maps in there, Jim. We're drawing maps.
I mean, I'll draw the maps. I love making maps.
Yeah, Aaron would be way better at drawing those maps. You feel the passion in the little tiny rivulets of the tributary. Yeah.
So we're introduced to a few characters in this first issue, including this sheriff writer wannabe who he looks fun, and then the hunters who are after Miss Stairbend. What can we look forward to coming up? And issue 2, what can you tease us with?
Well, so we kind of broke it up so that each issue is like a sort of they work on their own, but they're also part of the story. So issue 2 is kind of a horror sort of monster issue, and then issue 3 is we have to do a shootout, and then 4 we get really weird and metaphysical and do some kind of Lovecraftian stuff, and then I won't ruin 5, but yeah, each issue kind of we do a different sort of little bit of thing. Moving our characters around to different places. And one thing I keep kind of pushing in everything I do is that each issue is like a unit to itself, because I still think sometimes people come in at issue 3. It must happen, right? So I keep trying to do that. Yeah. And it gives Jim like some different stuff to draw. So issue 2, you have to draw a bunch of monsters, which is the easier issue to draw. And then we drop issue 3 on you with all the crazy action set piece. And then 4 is just going to, I try not to kill the artist. It also is a big part of the job.
So then, Jim, how are you holding out?
Yeah.
I'm like no, it's been a blast drawing this. I always will complain when I have to do layouts. It doesn't matter. Somebody could write a script that is 1 panel a page, and I'll be like, what is this? There's too much going on here. And so that is always the most frustrating part for me, and that's where I'm at currently. But once I get past that, once I figure out the rhythm of what is happening, then it's just a joy to me to draw. And I've always, I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I actually I love drawing. So when I get to sink my teeth into something like this and really dig into textures and lighting and considerations like that, those are things that not a lot of people give time to. So I'm very lucky in that I'm able to do that with this and try and dig into those those real sort of arty rendering European looks and the brush strokes that happen there, and the old Jack Davis stuff and the Wally Wood shadows, and really trying to just have fun with all that, because why else would you draw if you're not loving it? So it's been fun. It's been tough because I don't know what the hell is happening half the time. But once I figure that out, I'm like, oh, okay, I think.
I appreciate that. Yeah. It sounds, and the idea of it, how each issue works, like, I didn't know that. And I'm very fascinated to see how all of that will come together in the end. I'm very excited. And thank you so much for being here. But I have one more question that Dan has said I am legally obligated to ask. He's making me do this. If you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do?
Oh, see, that's why we had to know if we knew what it was.
Yeah.
Right, gotcha.
Mine would probably end up making some type of Reuben sandwich for me.
Reuben Goldberg machine.
A Reuben Goldberg machine. And I could live in a lap of luxury and gain 80
I
pounds
think that
overnight.
answer wins.
Yeah, that's. I'd like to be.
Oh my God.
I could draw and write at the same time somehow. Like I could just be doing like one hand writing some stuff, and then the other hand like doing a cover or something. I don't know how to set that up, but if I could get that done, because the switching back and forth thing is for the birds. I'm just getting sick of it. I want to be able to just do it all at the same time.
I would have a Pee Wee Herman style one that took care of all of the mundane tasks that my ADHD mind just finds the most loathsome activities that I just cannot deal with. Write a check, like set it up. Write my check to myself for the month, like pay the credit card bill, like whatever.
Reminding me of something that totally stresses me out is that in that Pee-wee's Big Adventure, he has the big Rube Goldberg machine, and it makes that amazing food, right? It's like a combination of cereal and pancakes, eggs. And he takes one spoonful and then he leaves. I'm like, for some reason, it really bothers me. To this day, I can feel the anxiety I felt that he just left it.
But that's the genius of that scene.
No, but I don't like it. It's like it just sat there for the whole day, So there you
go. I didn't think about the implications of that. I mean, at least it's something that smells good. At least they didn't leave out like raw meat or something.
If you leave a bowl of Pops and the Captain Crunch was on top of the pancake. I've seen that movie a million times, so. But it's like Captain Crunch on top of pancakes and eggs, I think. The eggs are not, the Captain Crunch is going to be all right. But, the eggs are not going to go well. I'm just saying, it really bothers me. I'm sorry, Pee-wee.
I'm glad we know this about you now.
Oh, it's a Paul Reuben Goldberg machine.
Full circle.
Here you go. We should all be pun-ish.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh my God.
Shit, there you go.
So,
the levels, I'm telling you, the levels. It's just like West of Sundown. There's so many levels happening.
So many.
It's got to put a pin in it. So I'm so excited you all were able to stop by. Is there anything our listeners should be picking up for you other than this right now? Are there any series or things going on that you want to make sure people are checking out?
You should pick up Jim's book, Come Home India, if you haven't read it. That is the finest book of the year that it came out, and it's a great sort of example of what Jim does, and also a really, really powerful story.
Yeah.
Okay then. Yeah. I'll just be quiet.
You should pick up, I guess, this is shameless self-promotion, my run on Suicide Squad. Issue 1 came out a couple weeks ago. Suicide Squad Blaze, Black Label. Issue 1 is out. It's 3 issues, 48 pages each, prestige format. Cy Spurrier's writing, Jordi Belair on colors, and Aditya Bedekar on letters. It's really great. We're right in the midst of like getting issue 2 ready for press. And layout. Speaking of layouts, I've been working. I lost track of time and got late to the interview because I was working on layouts, and layouts are also the bane of my existence.
Yeah, and I want to say that, Tim, what is the name of your book? The newest one that you sent me.
Chronophage.
PDF. What? Yeah. If you can get your hands on that, check that out, because it's not like anything I've really read by Tim before. So that's some pretty interesting stuff there.
Yeah, that's a OGN, so it's like a full story. Thanks, Jim. It is not like what I usually do. There's no fart jokes in it or anything.
Not a one. I kept waiting for it. I was disappointed at the end, so I just drew some in.
I think that we had a review of that go out the same day that Nikki's the horniest comics article came out. So it was our big Tim Seeley day.
That's right. You guys did review it, and yes, it is kind of horny, but there's a plot. The sex in this one is for the plot, actually.
So is Money Shots. Just you got to get something to come forward.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I got one more shameless plug. I always forget to do this, and I feel bad because of the rest of the people that are in the group. I said at the beginning of the interview, I'm a dungeon master. I actually run a Twitch game every other Sunday. Our next game is not, well, as of recording, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday. And comic book writer Mark Andraco plays with me, and a bunch of my other friends who work in the comic book orb. One of my friends works at Golden Apple Comics in LA. And another one works for a digital publisher. And I run a old school Dark Sun game. It is brutal as fuck. So if you like really hard hitting, and everything that I do tends to, I guess, be like really, like I always bring in like just the darkest shit. So we get into some heavy shit in that world, because Dark Sun is basically Mad Max meets Conan. And then everything is based on slavery. So it's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible world where a few small individuals fight for some glimmer of hope. And Mark Andraco is like starting to come out of his shell with the game, and it's so fun to watch Mark play D&D. And Mark, this is just gives you a sense of it. Mark, before he started playing with us, the last time he had played Dungeons and Dragons was first edition in the early 80s. So it's been over 30 years since that dude has played Dungeons and Dragons. So is it run on the D&D system? Yeah, I'm updating. We're playing in 5th edition, so we kind of like update on the fly. It's like me and my psychotic brain. I was like, sure, I'll run Dark Sun 2nd edition game in 5th edition, and not realizing I was going to have just a shit ton of work to do that and make that possible. So yeah, we run through D&D Beyond.
So you can find us at Gatecrashers Pod on all social media. You can find our website at gatecrashers.fan. And we will catch you again soon.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.